So yeah, as I mentioned in the introduction, Avery is a successful DJ, and a lot of the time I think there's a valid belief that these skills need to be demarcated. I mean, how often do you hear things like just because they're a good producer doesn't make them a good DJ, and vice versa. But I think with Avery, to some extent, the two kind of inform each other. And he's spoken about this himself, so I'm quoting here. I've been really interested over the past few years in playing all night long, 8, 9, 10 hours. I'm fascinated with building the atmosphere from the ground up. This goes back to the idea of it all coming from the same place. As long as you can draw a line between all of these records, why aren't they existing in the same space? That's something I wanted to push on the album. It all works together. It all has a common goal. Clearly, it isn't absolutely necessary that you produce good music to be a successful DJ. Ben UFO is one example off the top of my head that comes to mind, which obviously suggests that they are different skills. But in the case of Avery, I think there is something mutually beneficial. I think that the music he makes, the albums he releases, are influenced by his DJ sets and vice versa. Do you know what I'm getting at, or do you think I'm being a bit tenuous?
No, I definitely know what you're getting at. I just think it's such a difficult thing to try and explain. We talked about track listing earlier, but I think this goes way beyond this. There is definitely a relationship, but I mean, wondering, Ollie, what do you think is, what exactly is mutually beneficial between being a DJ and being a producer? Like, what did you notice when you've seen him do live DJ sets?
Basically, when I've seen him play in the past, what has struck me the most is he has a real awareness for where each track lies in the set. So noises from half an hour ago feel relevant now. Where I am now affects where I am in an hour's time. And there's a relationship beyond like a linear track by track basis. There's thought behind how everything is kind of working cohesively, and it sounds super cliche to say it, but it does suck you into a world. Like, I saw him play at Festival like 6-7 years ago it was quite long. It was like 4 hours. And for the first hour, all he played was ambient, drone, beatless music. And if you think that takes some bottle, I think, to do at a festival stage.
At festival as well, yeah.
Yeah, like we could have gone see like Basement Jaxx, Bonobo, Caribou, Outkast, like anything like that. But I think to have the belief that, okay, these people are going to stick with me, and I'll ratchet the pressure up bit by bit to the point where all the brakes are off. And to me, it's only obvious that in that situation, the music's going to feel a lot more intense than if he'd just gone hammers and tong from the start. Do you know what I mean? And I think that kind of appreciation of how the set works as a whole is something that I see in his albums quite a lot. I mean, we're talking about how Drone Logic is a kind of trip or a journey, and I think that kind of gets at what I'm saying. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think you've put it really well. And obviously, it's always quite difficult when you try and reduce DJing, as with any art form, you can end up being a bit reductive. But I think what you're talking about, right, with this sense of building and releasing pressure. So the payoff, if you've done an hour of beatless music that has really ratcheted up this pressure that's existing in the crowd to then release, it's way, way more substantial. And I think, as you say, there's this relationship he has in his albums, at least, between a song that's happened half an hour ago that, it has to make causal sense, not just because what's coming before and after it, but what is, going to come in an hour and has come an hour before, and especially in his all night long sets. I would say that, I guess, with DJing, one of the most important things is understanding people's and cultural relationships to sounds, right? So, how these sounds are going to interact not just in forms of the music of them, but how people perceive them and see them in relating to the rest of the music that's been released. So I think he gets that on another level, without a doubt. What I would ask you is that clearly it has, you've made a great argument that his DJing informs his production. Well, then why is it that there's so many DJs out there who can, produce good EPs, make good club tracks, but then when they come to an album, they just don't manage it. They just don't manage it, and I don't understand.
I feel like sometimes it can be a little bit of a poison chalice for contemporary producers, because as you say, they've had quite a few successful releases, but then it seems as though for quote unquote the album, things have to be changed slightly. And yeah, I don't know, I feel like some kind of approach it like an extended EP of just like strictly club focused music, or they go the other way and kind of go like beatless and ambient to show quote unquote a softer side or something like that. I mean, are there any that I sense from your voice? Are there any that you think producers maybe that haven't done such a great job with the album?
I mean, someone I was just thinking of when you were saying, this choice between whether you go for the full album worth of club bangers or you go for an album that's completely ambient. The Shanti Celeste, who's a DJ that we both love and have really enjoyed whenever we've seen her play, her last album, or her debut album, the Tangerine, it wasn't bad, but it suffered from, it's like it didn't know whether to go full on club music or go full beatless and ambient, and then it just ended up being this middling thing that was a bit of the one and a bit of the other, didn't really have much energy, and just didn't have any of the immediacy of her singles that have been released as just tracks for DJ sets.
Yeah. And
I think what it shows is that it's really, really, really hard to make a consistent and re-listenable electronic album in a way that maybe it isn't with pop or guitar music. Are there any that stand out to you as well?
I think K-Lone's album from March this year, Cape Sierra, I've really, really enjoyed that. If people on the podcast maybe haven't given that a listen, definitely check that out. The other one in the last few years I've really enjoyed is by Kelly Lee Owens, who actually does all the vocals on Drone Logic. Okay. And her and Avery used to work together in a record store in London, and I don't know, there's definite similarities, I think, between her record and Drone Logic. So yeah, those are a couple that I feel have done it justice, let's say.